because everybody that I've spoken to in the last few weeks to say that I was speaking here thought that I was going to follow from Taylor Swift and that you were going to be hundreds of thousands of people and I'd move the Irish economy by just simply turning up. Well, David FitzSimons, I'm afraid, doesn't quite come with the Taylor Swift promise, but I hope to be interesting at least for the next 10 minutes. So thank you very much for the introduction. I'm David FitzSimons, the Director of the European Remanufacturing Council. We came together in 2017 to bring together companies in Europe who remanufacture products. That's to say they bring back their own products or someone else's for disassembly, repair, testing, and putting back on the market as a new product. That's what remanufacturing is. It's sometimes described as reconditioning, refurbishment, in the aviation sector as maintenance, essentially, maintenance and repair, MRO. But in essence, it's a very important part of the circular economy because it extends the life of products. Rather than ultimately smashing things up, getting the material back, and recycling the material, extending the life of products is a way of really moving the dial if you want to reduce our impact in putting CO2 molecules into the atmosphere. So what do I want to talk to you about this morning? Well, very briefly, 4 things. The first is I want to give you an overview of what remanufacturing is in Europe, but then I want to take you through right through to give you a sense of what the panel discussion might focus on. And most importantly, I've chosen some companies to give you a sense about what turning the word remanufacturing into real business looks like. And I've deliberately chosen some businesses you've never heard of. Or, well, actually, most of the businesses you won't have heard of. I could have chosen all OEMs, from Schneider Electric through to Michelin tires. But I've chosen some, I think, fairly interesting fairly interesting companies. I could talk tires as well, but some interesting companies. 100 billion sales in Europe is the target by 2030. Now that sounds like a great deal of money, but it's not. It's still a very small and generally fragile sector that could very easily find itself destroyed by inadvertent regulations and metrics. It's easy to start to spoil what we've already got for remanufacturing in Europe by doing the wrong thing. I think there's lots of well-intended people working in this area, but sometimes they mix up repair with remanufacture. And so policies that work really well for repair, and almost all remanufacturers are very pro the right to repair, can end up undermining existing remanufacturing businesses. So I'll give you a touch of that today. So there are 3 business models in remanufacturing. There's the OEM who takes back their own product to disassemble it. In my view, that's the best. If policy can force more OEMs to take back their own product, it means they design their product for disassembly. It means they have to organize themselves for disassembly and have the reverse logistics in place. I thought the ANPOST presentation was perfect as an example of that enabling technology that we need to preserve and build. So that's the first model. The OEM takes back their own product. The second one is that the OEM asks a third party to do that. And the third one is the bravest of all, where an independent company says, good God, why is this product not being brought back, repaired, refurbished, remanufactured, and put back in the market? And that's a really tough space to be in, but many of those people are heroic businesses who discover all the problems, and then they sometimes get bought out by the OEM, who have then learned from the independent how to take back their own products and others. So 3 business models. So I'm going to begin with what I think is a dose of reality, the sort of things that we simply do not talk about, but it's the reality of the world. That chart on the left says to you that we've become rich by increasing our productivity around people. Fantastic. That's how we got richer. The bottom line is material productivity. Now, if academics in the room, I think, would want to ask some questions about how it is that material productivity has flatlined since 1970. And I have some doubts about it. But nevertheless, there it is. Material productivity unchanged since 1970, but the productivity of humans much improved. And there's a reason, there's an underlying reason for this that I think we should acknowledge in our circular economy work. And that is every year we import about 1.5% on average deflation from other economies. And that deflation means that the product that you bought that you're going to buy today, next year will be 1.5% on average cheaper. Or the materials that you're using this year, next year, whether it's plastics, I think a fine example, thank you, Katerina, but many others, the same will be true. The materials will be cheaper next year and the year after. So for the circular economy, it's really difficult to be able to work against that economic process of imported deflation. And the EU has a policy of more free trade deals because we know that free trade makes us all richer. That is a noble objective and one that we have to continue to pursue. But it frustrates the circular economy. And I don't think we acknowledge that enough. That it makes it really hard or harder than we assume to build a circular economy. It is like we want to accelerate the circular economy whilst we've still got the handbrake. Some cars still have handbrakes. A handbrake half on. Now, the policies that we're developing in the EU, things like the Eco-Design Directive, the Digital Product Passport, extended producer responsibility, these are very sophisticated, complex, difficult, but targeted policies to build the circular economy. They're fantastic if they work. But if you're a business in the circular economy, what you're worried about is that 1.5% every year is making your life ever harder. Will these policies be sufficient to push you and your business along faster than that pressure on you? And we don't know that yet. A lot of the discussion that we're having is, will they or won't they? But we need, I think, without a doubt, to push harder to create the circular economy. Otherwise, we're going to report in 5 years and 10 years that the circular economy it seems to be mysteriously not growing fast enough. That's where we'll be unless we acknowledge the truth of how hard it is when we've got a world economy that is making things cheaper, easier, at bigger scale. So that's where we come from the chart on the left-hand side to the policy debate. Are we going to be able to build a circular economy fast enough, given the crisis that we all know is coming, relating, apart from the President of the United States, for the climate crisis? Will we get there fast enough? So remanufacturing's contribution to that is that 90% of what's currently in place is in the business-to-business space. And the circular economy policies are trying to take the expertise that's been developed in the existing about 70 billion sales a year in Europe from the B2B space into the B2C space. That's where we need to get to. So it's a much more common thing to do that when you buy a product that you're expecting to return it so that its life can be extended. And there's a clear route to do that using, and it already happens in some products, using Anpost and other prepaid delivery systems for reverse logistics. So getting from B2B to B2C is where we want to be, and it's already happening. Printers and cartridges, one example. Telecoms. Your mobile phones typically now are returned for refurbishment and reuse. Laptops. Well, laptops I want to speak about later because Ireland, oddly enough, is one of the leaders in Europe in finding procurement methods for remanufactured laptops. And then aftermarket products, particularly in the automotive sector, lots of automotive aftermarket products are remanufactured. So I promised to give you some companies that I think are really interesting. And the first one is in the room today. We have a company that's come all the way from Croatia. Philip, where are you? I know you're here. That man there, Philip, well, thank you for traveling all the way from Croatia to Dublin. Philip is an ex-Canon executive, and he has started a company called Orbitex, which takes back used printers, remanufactures them for sale. After they've been remanufactured, the intention is to a very high standard, so much so that you wouldn't know the difference between a new machine and a remanufactured one. I would encourage you, he's an example of that model that I gave, the hard one, of the independent, in this case, semi-independent. I'd encourage you to go and say hello to Philip while you're here at the conference and find out what it's like to be in that part of the remanufacturing world. You're a great witness. Thanks for being here. The second company you've never heard of is a French company called Cordon Group. Now, Cordon Group take back Wi-Fi boxes and remanufacture them and then put them out into the market again. That's how they started. They've now got 4,000 employees, and they remanufacture a whole host of equipment, from handheld vacuum cleaners through to drones, some for the military. And the Cordon Group, who, as I say, you've never heard of, their business model is to be the approved third-party expert for brands and OEMs who want their product to be remanufactured to their specification. They choose to be disguised so that nobody really knows them, but they do an excellent job. Why is it that they've just bought a business in the United States? It's because their software system is so good that they can get a product back. They know exactly how it's come back, when it arrives, how quickly to get through the factory and out the door again, that process is as swift and cost-effective as possible. That's their advantage. It's not that they remanufacture per se, it is because they know how to control the system. So Cordon Group as an example of how you develop expertise to grow that sector for them. I expect they'll do extremely well. P-Laser is a company that is removing corrosion from products before they then get remanufactured, such that you wouldn't even know that there's ever been corrosion on the product. And then D&B Audio Technique. Well, I mentioned in a stadium of this size, every big stadium in the world has got big loudspeakers in it. They're made in Stuttgart, a company with about 120 employees. They were challenged by the music industry to make a contribution to sustainability. They started to remanufacture their own products and now sell their remanufactured products to the music industry throughout the world. And Brother, who you should all have recognized, is another printer and cartridge business, but specifically on their own cartridges, they have they take back their own cartridges for remanufacture, and you can use them as new. So there are just a few examples. And I want to finish on tariffs and the difference between tariffs and the EU circular economy policies. We have to talk about what's happened in the United States in the last few months because, anecdotally so far, it seems to have transformed companies who are remanufacturing and recycling in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. Do not confuse what I'm about to say as my support for policy around tariffs. Do not, please, quote me as saying Trump is a marvelous fellow who's managed to transform the circular economy. But the fact of the matter is that if you are a remanufacturer or recycler now in the United States, Mexico, or Canada, the economics of your business has been transformed because tariffs have removed the imported 1.5% that I spoke about earlier and turned it around into removing that competition altogether. So the margin is now much larger. Invariably, sales have improved dramatically. And I think the question for us in Europe is we are stuck somewhere between China, where we saw plastics being sent immediately to Europe to force prices down when they couldn't go to America, and in America with tariffs, whether our policies are going to be sufficient to grow our circular economy businesses, or whether in fact what's going to happen is that circular economy businesses will grow fastest in America. They will develop the same sorts of advantages that Cordon Group have done, and that in 10 years' time we'll look back and wonder why we were not able to put our own policy instruments in place faster to find out whether they were better than the Trump tariffs. I think that's a big question for us and one we cannot dodge. So to finish up, because I've got limited time, if you're an Irish innovator, I say to you, don't necessarily look for products to remanufacture. Look for all the enabling technologies around the circular economy, because I suspect that's where Irish advantages lie. The second thing for policymakers, I say, we better think very carefully. We don't know whether it's going to happen, but if the tariffs in the United States stick, what would be the impact on our own policies and whether we can accelerate our own policies in the EU? On the WE review, which we've started to speak about today, I would say to you, without a doubt, we should make sure that during the WE review that we try to balance up this drive for material recycling with using it to extend the life of products. At the moment, we don't, and I think we'll hear a little bit more about that in a moment. And finally, on procurement, which is crucial if we're going to build a green economy and a circular economy. It's really good to be here in Ireland because you've taken risks here in trying to build procurement that works for remanufactured product. I know it's imperfect, but you've done it. And to that I say, well done. And whenever I have an audience in Brussels, I always highlight what's happened here in Ireland and hope that that would be magnified to other parts of the EU. I hope you are imitated. Thank you all.